Welcome to the You Go First podcast. This is the place where we bring together thought leaders, business pioneers, personal development gurus, and just about any person we discover that will inspire and compel you to go first in all areas of your life. Please welcome keynote speaker, philanthropist, and the official head dream chaser for Odyssey Teams, Inc., our host, Lane Hensley.
Hi, this is Lane Hensley, again, your host of You Go First. I'm excited to have another installment today. I've invited a dear friend that we have not talked in a really long time. So first of all, I just want to welcome Doug to the podcast here at You Go First. Thanks for being here, Doug.
Thank you, Lane. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too, because, we'll talk more about this, but there was a good chance you would not be here and not be here able to speak because now that we've talked and I learned what happened to you, you have the record as being officially deceased for the longest in Stanford history. It was 38 minutes, I think. How long was it?
38 minutes, yeah.
So for 38 minutes, you were officially dead.
Somewhere else.
I want to hear more about that. So, to introduce our audience, first of all, this is Doug Reid. And when Doug and I met, he was one of the top leaders at Gallo Glass. At that point, Gallo was the largest glass manufacturer in the world. He worked right alongside John Gallo and family in growing that business. I think you, at some point, moved over to the Gallo wine side. And after, I think we worked together for 5 or 6 or even 7 years with developing the leadership program for integrating, the MBAs with the, and all the complexities of a growing business. And I know you were really one of the top people in that company. And we just clicked, and I know you went on to do some big, great things. So if we know at some point something happened where you end up deceased for 38 minutes, and now you're sitting here talking to me, there's some miracles that happened along the way there. Let's give the simple stuff. What did you do work experience-wise? What happened after our work together? Give our listeners just a sense of the roles that you played, and then what culminated in you ending up deceased for 38 minutes and now sitting here with me.
Yeah, so I think if memory serves me, after I worked with you, Lane, a few times, and that was so much fun, by the way, I moved on to the winery and got the Master Black Belt in Six Sigma and other things that Gallo helped me do, and helped kind of transition that winery into a kind of a food production operation from microbiology, chemistry, and cleanliness, and all that serves today to be the foundation of how you make wines and not just make them, but get them sanitary wise into the bottle and safe for people to consume.
Yeah.
So kind of transitioned, did that for a little while, a few years, and then moved over to Constellation, which is at one point was the arch rival of Gallo.
Yeah, I think they merged recently, right?
Well,
or Gallo bought up some of their companies.
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
They're just huge now. Yeah.
So find myself then at Constellation, and again back in the wineries, mostly in the North America coastal wineries, and out of the blue, answered the phone and went to work for Blue Diamond Growers, which is an almond company.
Okay, yeah, here we are in Chico. We call them almonds. There's a lot of
shake the L out.
That's right. Yep. So Blue Diamond, and huge in Chico here. So
well, and it's a huge co-op. It's a farmer-owned co-op, still is. And the difference was back then they got a new president, and he wanted to transition this into a food business. And all the farmers were hoping to do that as well. And somehow they called me along to help them transition their old ways into more efficient ways. In fact, my charter was and had always been to bring $10 million of margin enhancement, new monies, without spending a lot of capital. And which that's what I set out to do. So went over to Blue Diamond, and the Sacramento plant had about 850 employees and about 350 down in Salida. I ran operations and had a lot of fun and made the marks that were expected. And we helped grow that company really from a smaller farmer-owned co-op to a practically $2 billion a year operation. And still growing, by the way. So kind of one of those feel-good type of assignments. However,
plot twist.
There's a plot twist, yeah. And just leave it at that. I guess I had a lot of fun, met the marks, and we grew that business. And anytime you're growing business, there's challenges, there's stresses, there's things that come your way. So that's kind of the catch up, if you will, from the time that we worked together at Gallo Glass to 2018.
So 2018, you're hitting these big marks, you're helping grow Blue Diamond. And I know the first time that you reached out to me, you say, hey, I got to tell you a story. Yeah, and I was captivated. I was like, oh my gosh, can you be on the podcast? People need to hear this story because, I know this event happened in a coffee shop. And, life is, people say, in school you learn a lesson and then get the test. In life, you get a test and then learn a lesson. And, if you're not learning these tests, they come over and over and over. And, I like to think of like the daily grind of work and, you're growing business, hitting marks and all that stuff. And I know that, when you're telling me this story about what happened, I was just mind blown. I know you are a high level leader. You're out there just grinding it out, hitting big numbers for huge companies and trying to grow things. And then what happens? Tell our listeners, how did you end up deceased for 38 minutes?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what happened. I don't even think the doctors can explain what exactly happened. However, from a high level, they all have said and agreed that it was stress. Now, all along in these assignments that I had, I knew my job. I knew what needed to be done. And I was the guy that said, got a little education, got a little bit of wisdom. However, I'll outwork anybody around me if that's what it takes. And by doing that, it takes up time. And before you know it, you get in this routine. You're in this kind of a clone mantra, and you just do. And you're always doing. So this particular morning, sketchy memory at best, but I've since met with some of the folks that were there, and they've filled me in on kind of the story and what happened. But evidently, I went to meet with a contact. We had a conversation that I have no memory of, and I stood up to leave. I was done. I guess we were done. And I stood up to leave, and he said that I grabbed both sides of the table and just leaned into him, leaned right over into his face, and took a deep breath and then growled, like exhausted that breath, and growled like a bear. And then and then apparently just fell face down onto the table. And of course, it freaked him right out.
Sure.
And he didn't,
I guess that's the end of this meeting.
Yeah.
Wow.
And apparently he grabbed a hold and tried to slide me back into my chair. I think he says I missed the chair, went onto the ground. And this is where some of those just unexplainable things just came out of nowhere. So it happened to be a person that was also there getting a cup of coffee, because that was her morning routine, is a retired medical professional, and she was having a reoccurring nightmare for months prior to this, that she was going to have to save somebody's life in this coffee shop. And this is her explaining this to me. Okay.
Oh my.
So I've since talked with her, and so she instantly, apparently, she says she just leapt from where she was right over to where I was on the ground, and then started the chest compressions. And I believe her husband, retired policeman, was doing mouth to mouth while she was doing chest, and she wouldn't let it go. She said, I was not going to let you.
Wow. Well, she's had this premonition.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Where did this come from? Right.
Wow.
So, needless to say, many of the people that were in that coffee shop texted or sent 911,
Yeah.
So it took a while, and the paramedics came. And apparently she was instrumental in directing them of what was happening, what they're to do, or maybe not what to do, but she certainly had some kind of say in where they took me. Now, apparently, she previously had worked in the facility that wasn't far from that. I think it's called Valley Medical, a Stanford facility. And she somehow directed them, instead of taking me to the emergency room, directly to the cath lab so that they could get a stent in my heart. And don't ask me how she knew all this, but apparently from my responses to her chest compressions and such, she was instrumental in directing all this. So from the time that took place, when I was getting ready to leave, to the time that, they placed a stent, apparently my heart had started and then stopped quite a few times in that period. And then 38 minutes later, it started and didn't stop again. And so then comes the real question is, if he had been gone that long and you're not sure how much oxygen was to the brain, what do you do? So from my understanding, that Stanford facility had just gotten this equipment to not freeze, but cool down. It's called hyperbaric protocol. And so they instantly, when my heart started a rhythm and my new birthday, 38 minutes later, then they said, well, get the equipment hooked up and get him in it. So at that point, apparently, they sent me into the ICU and this equipment was plugged in and I have these pictures of, it looks like a leather blanket. It's not leather, but apparently underneath these blankets is just really cool air, and they have cooled down the stuff they're pumping into my veins. And several days goes on this way to where my core temperature was at about a 33 degrees Celsius level, which doesn't seem that cold, but to a 98.6 degree body, that's very cold. So that's the way I laid for
33 degrees Celsius? Okay.
What is that? 84 degrees or something. But nonetheless, the point there is to kind of arrest all of your organs, and so your body doesn't have to support them, and let your brain kind of get the feed from the blood and
so you're in kind of a medically induced coma at this point?
Completely on life support.
Warm blood to the brain, but not to the rest of your body.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know exactness, but something close to that. So I guess the big hinge is on the fifth day that they had been treating my brain this way. They started warming me up, and they wanted to see if I was going to respond. And that's when I had, don't know how this all happens, but I remember opening my eyes, and there was this white coat man, doctor obviously, standing at the end of my bed. And he was asking the questions. Even though I had things in my throat still, I could respond with head nods and stuff.
And they're thinking,
grunts.
This guy's going to be a vegetable.
Correct.
There's no way. And they're keeping you at 91 Fahrenheit, by the way. I just received,
Okay, 91.
So way below,
yeah.
And they're thinking, okay, maybe this guy wakes up, maybe he doesn't. But if he does, it's going to be a miracle if he's got any brain capacity at all.
And what kind of damage will there be? That was kind of the expectation. So I heard him speak. I think he asked if I knew where I was. Well, in my mind, I certainly wouldn't have thought that I'd had a heart attack and that I was there. Yeah. So I told him where I thought I was, and he just got this big smile on his face, and he turned to the lady next to him, which was my mother, and looked right at my mother and said, he's going to be just fine.
Oh my gosh.
Apparently, I was explaining that I must have had a wreck on a motorcycle ride, because that's the last memory that I had was this motorcycle ride. And I was explaining to him, I guess I must have wiped out. What did I break?
No.
You had a Widowmaker Heart Attack. And of course I had not only no idea what that was, but I also thought, no, that couldn't happen to me. It happens to other people, not me.
Wow. So fast forward a little for us. So now you're back. Like you've got some faculties. How long before you're able to sit here talking to me right now? And what was just a quick kind of the progression of how long were you? When did you get out of the hospital, and then how long were you in a sort of fog, or how did it happen?
During the time that I was in that hospital, there was quite a fog. I don't have much memory of it at all. There's bits and pieces that my daughter or my mother has explained, and I have that, but most of it was gone. And I think I was there for about 8 days in the intensive care unit, which insurances and all this good stuff had me sent to a different hospital. And then I think I was in that other hospital another 8 or 10 days. In total, it was not so much about my heart, it was about my brain and what kind of life would I be able to lead. Well, surprisingly enough, and I take this all the way back to the lady that happened to be getting a cup of coffee there that started the chest compressions, I've yet to find big problems with motor skills, dexterity, things like this. Now, frankly, I can tell you I have no memory of about 2 weeks before that event. And I started getting some of the memory of being in a hospital at the very tail end. But then, and this all happened, by the way, November 12th. It's I call it my new birthday. And I don't have much memory of even Christmas that December.
2018.
Yeah.
So,
less than a year ago.
Yeah, less than a year ago.
So Christmas is a bit fuzzy still, but I'll never forget, early February, it was, I had gotten used to this routine of medications, sleep, rise, medications. I was giving myself shots in the stomach, and that was my new routine. But this particular morning, I woke up and it was as if somebody flipped a switch and everything came back.
Wow.
All of a sudden it was, I couldn't help. One of the first things I thought was, wait a second, I got to go to work. What about this? I
got to make my $10 million in new business here. It's
That's
time to
right.
get back to the grind. Yeah.
Well, and then the scariest part, hey, I've got to pay my bills. I haven't paid my mortgage in a month and a half or 2 months. So I got some phone calls and it was like a switch.
Wow.
And that was in February. And I would say from that point on, it was caution, because I don't know what's going to work and what's not, but you kind of trial and error and you find that it's there and you keep moving forward. So that's kind of the event and the sequence sense.
Yeah.
And here I am now talking to you and having still a lot of questions of, okay, now what?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the conversation is, we're here. You go first. The idea is, how do we compel or inspire people to go first, to make changes in their lives, to forgive, to move forward, to take risk, to, it takes a lot of courage to go first. And, from when I knew you were always the guy that's like, I'll go first. I'll work the hardest. I'll work the longest. I'll apply myself the most. I'll take ownership. I'll make the change happen. And yet with going first, sometimes there is, stress. And like you said, that this was related to stress. This was related to that. And I like to use this word grind. And, I know as we're talking about, like when you want to tell this story about, and I think of coffee as like the coffee grinder. You walk into a coffee shop and it's like that big grinder is right there. And as our listeners go into a coffee shop, I hope that they can flash back on this conversation and go, okay, hey, how hard am I grinding today? And am I going to have that coffee shop moment that you had, which stops everything and says, hey, how hard are you pushing yourself and for what? So what's next for you? I know you're not currently working at Blue Diamond. You're not back in that grind. Any sort of like, what is going on? What are you doing as you're recovering? You're still recovering to some degree. And, I know that we're talking because I want to help get the message out there to the world and our clients and people we work with at Odyssey and through the podcast to say, hey, maybe slow down sometimes in the grind and see those priorities. So what's your message, or what are you sort of bringing out of that experience? And to flash back, any after death experiences, did you have anything? So let's go there, and then let's go with what's next in your I'm alive sort of.
So here's what I could fit into words, or use words to explain this. No, I didn't have, a white light. No, I didn't hear voices. And I know, some people have explained that in explicit. However, I feel there's something that was even better. There was this feeling Okay. It was not like a memory. It was just it was a feeling in that moment. And it was a feeling that was beyond anything that I could explain with words, because it was so pleasant. It was so it was complete elation beyond anything I could imagine. And I had no pain, no hurt, no discomfort. It was such a nice feeling that, and again, I knew I wasn't here. I wasn't in this place. I was somewhere else. But oh my goodness, it felt so good. I didn't want to leave that place. And it's not like somebody asked me. Leave that feeling.
That feeling, whatever that was.
And it was so good. I was just like floating in it and couldn't get enough of it. And I wanted more of it. And then I keep saying 38 minutes. In that window of time, I would drift out of it and then back into it, and out of it and back into it. And towards the end, where my heart started again, I think is when I heard a very crystal clear voice, and it was my father's voice. He died a terrible death, suffocated type thing. It was COPD, cancer, lung cancer, all this kind of thing. But he basically just gutted it out and slowly suffocated his organs until his heart stopped. And that's how he died. And so he didn't sound like my father that I remember towards the end of his days. And I talked to him the night before he died. And this voice that I heard was him. It was his voice. It was a much younger voice and happy. And it just simply blew in, and that was it. And he said, not yet, you have work to do.
Whoa.
And it was just crystal clear.
Oh my gosh.
And then I think soon thereafter is when I think my heart started a rhythm, and I was no longer in that place. I was no longer feeling that just extreme elation. And I knew I could reconcile. I knew that I wasn't there anymore. I was somewhere else. Now, I didn't know I was in a hospital, didn't know I was in this, life-supported coma thing. But it was a different place. So that's the 38-minute reference that I have. And like I said, it's not, Hollywood, bright light, voices, and nothing like that.
Well, there's a voice. I mean, anything. I mean, this is, of course, we're talking about how beautiful, like, not yet, you have work to do.
Yeah. And just that candid, that off the cuff, almost like nonchalant, like, you know what I'm talking about.
Wow.
And so with that, I didn't have, again, memory, doctor, ICU, little sketchy memory. But then when I could kind of reconcile this, then you start thinking, what did he mean? What did those words mean? But really it was, maybe that's where it kind of transitions into the message or more of the purpose. And that is the grind, the feeling that I'd had for 34, 35 years that nothing else is that important. The thing that you have to do is do your job well, maybe even better than everybody else, to make more money, make more profits for the company, and help profitability lead the way of growth. And you say we all say this, we say, I get it, my family's important, and health and all these kinds of things, but you don't really live those words, because you're still going to get up and go to work the next day. Oh, I'll put off the doctor's appointment until another time, but I've got to get this $10 million in the bag this year. Yeah. And that's really, I think, that work to do is redistribute the balance of choice. And I think I look back and the days that when you and I were working together, and the things that I'd got to accomplish with Gallo and Constellation, and certainly with Blue Diamond, if I could have done that with better balance, and a little more focus on really those things that are important. And at the end of the day, the only thing that's really important are people around you, that family, which I'd probably not prioritized like I could have or should have. And if I have some regrets, that's what it would be. And so I think between my dad's voice, between the event that happened, I think that's where my next endeavor is going to be, is something with a little better balance, and maybe even helping a lot of folks that we all will say, hey, yeah, family's the only thing that's important. Oh, by the way, where are we at on the $10 million? Right?
Yeah, right.
We say it, but we don't live it. We don't act it. We don't behave it every day as much as maybe we could or should. And quite honestly, Lane, that's why I called you. That's why I thought, with all this, how would we be able to blend this back together to get this? If one other person could get this message before they walk into the boardroom or before they walk into the president's office or whatever to explain the metrics of that quarter or that year, maybe something like this wouldn't happen to the next person.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty lucky, I guess, with what happened. I would say some fraction of a percent of the survival rate. That's me. So I'm pretty lucky from that perspective. So yeah, I'd like to help somebody else avoid that.
Yeah. Well, we've I just loved that you reached out to me and just to reconnect with you and have you be here, because this is the first or one of the biggest steps now that you are recovering and ready to really tell the story. And that coffee grind, that grind awakening of, and then not have to go through what you've gone through, to say it's okay to shoot for those numbers, it's okay for those things, but we have to be better at practicing our behaviors along the way. And I don't know, I know you're a fit guy, you're always working out and all of that, and I know you're riding motorcycles again, and have you taken up yoga or meditation or things like that, like advice to our listeners about how can they be more peaceful and yet still in the grind, so to speak? What are you doing?
Well, that you just hit the two things that when I couldn't do physical fitness, because there was quite a length of time that I could only get, maybe from my bed to the couch and back and forth. But the thought of picking up a dumbbell or a curl bar or something is that's out there. That was beyond what I could even fathom at the time. And so the first thing that I did was remembered, wait a second, there's this thing called yoga. And there's meditation, which I didn't know much about. Mm-hmm. So
mindfulness, have you done anything in that realm as well? I mean, there's meditation, mindfulness, and there's so many great things out there. Today's
apps are just amazing, and YouTube is just amazing. So I think I got an app, and it was, I began my routine including that app. So at the time I was still drinking coffee. I didn't know why I didn't like the taste of it anymore, but I was still drinking coffee. So after my morning cup or two of coffee, then I was hitting this app, and it would make me sit and listen and put my brain in a good place. And I got to tell you, that was among the first times that I've done this, and it was kind of cool. And then I realized, wait a second, it's beyond cool. This is like full body relaxing, and there was things that were happening, or things that I was feeling, that it wasn't my normal routine anymore, and it was kind of moving. Combine that then with my physical movements progressing in the recovery, and then I started yoga. And as silly as going on YouTube and finding out what a morning salutation was, or what a simple stuff. But quite honestly, that led me to then being able to do more physical fitness type things. Not that I'm where I could be right now, but I'm a heck of a lot better than I was 5 years ago, no doubt. Anyway, those things I think are undervalued in today's. So if you ask me how many times a day did I used to do that before this event, of course, 0. It wasn't even on my chart. And today, there's not many mornings that go by that I don't make that a priority.
Yeah.
Instead of being the first one to work, I'll be the second or third, because this stuff's kind of important.
Yeah.
And it kind of sets your tone. I'm not trying to promote just yoga and meditations and things. I'm just saying that for me, it changed dramatically. It changed a lot of things. And I think the priorities, how important is it to get to work, to get your metrics, to get the things happening that deliver the metrics. All important. And I always discounted, well, if you don't have your health, you can't do those things. And I always thought, but that happens to other people. That won't happen to me.
Yeah.
That's other people. And today I'm telling you, it did happen to me. And there was many of not just days and weeks, but months that I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it outside, if I didn't know if I was going to be able to do physical things again.
Yeah.
And so when you are faced with that being your future and maybe your new reality, it kind of makes you rethink the priorities.
Yeah. Well, we're so thankful to hear your story. And I know plenty of companies, they have, you're sitting at your desk and all of a sudden you get alert. You need to move now. You need to stretch now. Take 3 deep breaths. And people are like, delete, and they're like, skip. And, companies are doing their best to have them have this awakening. And I think sometimes, if it's not connected to emotion, we don't remember it. And if it's just information, we're like, I understand that that's valuable, but I don't prioritize it. And I think the gift of you, and you're now, with your mental faculties back intact, and just the experiences you have as a high level leader, crushing it out there in the business world, to be able to go to groups and have them hear this podcast and hopefully share this podcast and say, hey, you know what? Hopefully this is the moment where they go, you know what? I don't want to have that coffee shop experience. I want to check my grind and see if I'm grinding too hard. And, what are the choices I'm making today to get the things done I need to get done? Like you say, of course, those things are important, but to do them in a way with more mindfulness and more peace and more balance. I don't feel like I could, it's great to see you. I know we're going to go to lunch and get to connect more, but our listeners, we're kind of in that half-hour block for them to get a little taste of what you've been through. We will put social networking and channels on, and maybe we'll have you back and have more conversation, because this is really a beginning. We're talking about how do we name your keynote or name your sort of life lessons that we want to put out there. There's 2 ways to be a keynote speaker, by the way. You have to say you're a keynote speaker, and usually you have to have something horrible happen to you, and you've got both those things in the bag. So, we're excited at Odyssey and at You Go First that you've come here first to tell your story and to hopefully inspire those leaders out there that are in the same place you were before this. And hopefully they can learn from your experience and your wisdom. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. This is both healing and part of the process, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah. Well, Doug Reid, good friend, and I'm so glad you're alive. Glad you could come here and tell your story. What a miracle you are, and what a gift that you've put yourself out there and gone first to now look at a change you want to make in your life, and you're starting with You Go First. So thank you. So everybody in here, please give a welcome to and a thank you to Doug Reid for being here today. Nice job, buddy. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So we will do some post edit. We'll put pictures up of Doug's story, and to all of our listeners out there, we will have links and things to, of course, to this podcast, as well as we have other people in the Odyssey network that teach mindfulness and things like that. So we'll try to help. And of course, Doug, TBD, lots of good things in your future now that you're back. So thank you.
Thanks.
I want to again thank Doug Reid for sharing his story on You Go First. If you have questions or comments for Doug, you can leave them below in the comments section on yougofirst.live, or you can leave it on the Facebook at Odyssey Teams in the comments section, and we will get those to Doug or get right back to you. Thanks, and make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to another episode of You Go First. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to listen to another episode, you can find us at yougofirst.live, or you can see more about our host, Lane Hensley, on his Instagram at OneDreamChaser. To learn more about his company, Odyssey Teams Inc., go to odysseyteams.com or follow all their social media channels at Odyssey Teams. Thanks again, and we hope that you will go first to share our podcast with a friend or colleague. Now, you go first.